Hi viewer, good to have you here on your agricultural television station. My name is Joshua Ishan, your host on the program Aqua Farming. For those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, Aqua Farming is a program that tells you all you need to know that is in the water. And of course, the program goes as far as it can to make sure we bring to you the best brains that can be able to discuss those topical issues that will be developing fish farming or anything that has to do with the aquatic world. And today is also a great day. We have a very big guest and an important guest as well. Happens to be a fisheries scientist and also a fisheries consultant. So of course, if I advise you, you need to get all the writing materials because rest assured you're going to be learning one or two, or better still, how you can contact the scientists directly. They're about talking business on how you can grow a fish. Talking about Mr. Gabriel Wase. Mr. Gabriel, again, it's good to have you in our studio.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today we'll be talking about fish grow out. Fish grower encompasses a lot of things that has to do with growing fish to the level of salt, and that is what it's all about. One of the most important aspects of fishing is selling them with a profitable margin for yourself thereabout, so you can also stay in business because you need to do it properly. So this is what we're going to be discussing, all that you need to know when it comes to growing your fish to the table size or to the melange, or rather to the smoking side of it. So let's go quickly. Mr. Gabriel,
Yes.
what is fish grow out?
Yes. Fish grow out encompasses all operations that are concerned from stocking of your fish seeds from day one, and then rearing them to a desired level of consumption. And that desired level could be table size, it could be smoking size, it could be melange, as the case may be. So all the activities that surrounds these operations is what we call or term grow out. And that is the next phase of production after the hatchery operation.
Okay, now can you just take us holistically, like from the beginning of grow out to maybe the end? Let's see.
Yes, generally in the business of fish farming, when you talk about the grow out, the first thing to do, you need to have a culture medium. That could be an earthen pond, that could be a concrete pond, it could be a tarpaulin, or any other holding tank that one may be able to manipulate, because today it is no longer conventional. You can just come out with any way you are able to have water enclosed that you can be able to rear your fish. So once that facility is made ready, and then the water of good quality, you procure your fish seeds from trusted breeders. So when you get your seeds from trusted breeders, you do what we call stocking, and that is the introduction of your acquired seed into the culture medium, which I have explained could either be an earthen pond, or a concrete pond, or a tarpaulin pond, or other similar structures or holding tanks. And so when you introduce them, and the process of introduction of those fish seeds, the seeds can be fingerlings, they could be juvenile, they could even be jumbo. For beginners, I will always advise you don't go with fingerlings because they are a bit technical to manage. So you can either start with juveniles or jumbo, which is
What is
safer.
the difference between juveniles, jumbo, and
The difference between the respective categories is just size. The fingerlings, like the name implies, is just like a finger, which is quite small. So at that age, they are still feeding on 1 mm, 0.8 to 1, or thereabout 1.2. And so when they becomes juvenile, that's at the point they can take 1.5 mm, they can take 2 mm, depending on the size they are. And then at jumbo, they can conveniently consume 2 mm or even 3 mm. But of course today, in the market, because of cost, the sizes keep reducing by the day. So but the difference between these categories is simply size. So when you stock your pond, you have to observe. You introduce your fingerlings or juveniles or the jumbo slowly into the tank. If you brought them from a jerry can, you lower it into the water, You allow them to swim. But even before that, there is what we call acclimatization. And that acclimatization is a process of conditioning the fish that is coming from a different environment to the new environment. So you may try to fetch from your pond, add up to the water in the jerry can where the fish came. So in a way, of course, fish experiences shock as well. Fish can tolerate wide temperature variations, but not sharp variations. Fish can tolerate temperature variation from 25 to 30 degrees or even more. But if that change happens suddenly, it results to a shock. So what you are doing is try to condition the fish to get used to the new environment. So you can fetch water from your holding facility into the jerry can. So you are mixing the old and the new water together. So the fish is getting to understand the change is gradual. Then you lower the jerry can into the pond, and the fish themselves will swim out of the jerry can into the pond, and they start their new life there. And at that point, the process of stocking is completed. So once that is done, of course, feeding should not take place immediately after stocking. You ought to allow the fish to relax and to get used to the new environment by giving it several hours, 4 to 5 hours before the next feeding, depending on the time of travel. If the fish were procured from a distant location to your farm, you require more time for them to settle. But if the fish is just coming from a nearby hatchery, you can just keep few hours and then you introduce the feed. So once the acclimatization is completed and the fish have settled, you begin your feeding. And like I've said the other time, feeding can be done twice a day. It can be done 3 times a day. But for the first few weeks of stocking, while they are still seeds, you can optimize your feeding by giving them 3 times a day, which is morning, afternoon, and evening. But of course, like I've always said, feed consumption is dependent on weather conditions, and temperature is a key factor. So if the weather is dull, they are likely going to consume less, and when there is heat, they are going to consume more. So during feeding is one mistake that most farmers make. Sometimes they calculate the quantity of feed to be administered, and then believing that this pond is supposed to consume 5 kg at a time, they just dump the 5 kg and go away. And sometimes the fish cannot even eat half of what has been dropped in the pond. Why? Because the appetite of the fish was not tested. So when you want to feed your fish, you first of all test the appetite of the fish by dropping few to see the response. So when you drop like a handful of the field in your pond, the fish are going to respond aggressively, and the level of aggression will tell you how much more they are in need. So you can now begin to give them in bits and in bits as they are picking. But when you just dump 5 kg because your calculation or your consultant recommended 5 kg at a time, you just dump it and go, you will be losing money by yourself because you are the cost. So you need to test the appetite before you give them the normal feed. And as long as they continue to take, if the calculation was for you to administer 5 kg at a time, you give them in bits at that particular time until it's exhausted. But if the weather is bad, they may not take even 3 kg. So you have to reserve the 2 for another time. So this is one place that some farmers used to incur unwarranted cost without even knowing, because they expect that fish is going to consume so quantity of feed, and they insist they must give it at all times. Usually during poor weather conditions like harmattan or cold seasons, fish does not eat much. They consume very little. So whatever quantity of feed they're meant to take, they're going to take less of it. Why? Because digestion at that time is quite slow. And as long as the stomach is still filled up, they don't require more until that place becomes empty. So when you are done, and among all this, while you proceed with your feeding, there is one vital point or factor that must not be neglected, and that is water. A lot of persons will ask, how often do I change my water? This has always been the question, and I keep telling them, it is not how often. The change of water in your pond is not to be documented by a day or two or a week or three as they want to hear, but it has to be based on need. It has to be based on need. You can change your water today and by tomorrow there is need to change again. You can change your water today and in the next 1 week the water is still okay. There are so many factors that can contribute. If you overstock your pond, then you have more water need than someone who has average number of fish in a pond. If you are overfeeding your fish, chances are also that the leftover are going to pollute your pond. So assuming you changed water in the morning and then your staff came to feed without testing the appetite and dropped a bag of feed and left, and fish could not even eat half of it, the rest is going to decay, it will decompose, it will pollute the water, which means by tomorrow again there is need for you to change that water. So if I had recommended water change for a week, then what will you do? That fish has to be in that bad water for 7 days, and that will result to mortality. So the water that you see is what we call the chemical analysis, which is what reveals the respective parameters of interest for fish. You have what we have: the oxygen, you have the pH, you have the ammonia, you have the nitrite, you have several others like turbidity, you have TDS. All of these must be controlled and they have to fall within a required range. And that is why in some locations fish farming is a bit difficult, especially when you have areas maybe close to industrial settings where there's a lot of inflow, deposition of chemical waste and all of that. So the underground water has been tampered with, the quality becomes bad. In such locations there is always need for you to go for a treatment plant, because that treatment plant is what will control the quality of the water to the desired level for fish to do well. So those parameters must be monitored, but the one of key interest is pH, because some of them don't really pose a lot of issues, like oxygen, because most of our farms are outdoor based, they are outdoor ponds, so we don't have problem of oxygen because there is free flow of air, and then atmospheric air easily dissolves on the water surfaces, even in our tanks, because we leave them open, so it's never an issue. But pH must be controlled. That's why I recommend every farmer should have a pH meter, at least a pH meter, so that from time to time you are able to determine what your pH, and once it goes against, is far outside the accepted range, the ideal pH for fish is neutral, which is 7.0. But the fish can tolerate deviations from the upper and the lower quarters. But if it gets to the extreme, it can no longer tolerate, especially if they are at the seed level. So the water quality during your grow out must be monitored continuously. And again, you must also know that sometimes if your water contains iron, your water contains ammonia, all of these are going to add to stress the fish. And that means that the growth rate is going to be less compared to what you should have if that water was of good quality. So water must be of high quality if one must achieve success in grow out. So along the line, as you are feeding, there is also another aspect which has been abused, which is the health aspect of fish. Almost all farmers today have become fish doctors, and you see them treating their fish indiscriminately. There are people who, from the hatchery, antibiotics, at grow out stage, antibiotics day in, day out, and it's really getting out of hand. It's really getting out of hand. While you are using antibiotics in your feeds, in your giving to your fish, there are residual effects, and this is part of what makes our fish considered as substandard, because sometimes the residual effect, the deposits from those chemicals, is still much in the fish at harvest because of the indiscriminate application. And most of the farmers don't even have understanding of the dosage. So once they see that this one can be used for fish, they keep pouring these antibiotics A, B and C, and then at the end of the day what you are eating becomes poison. So we ought to understand as farmers that it is not everything. Yes, you are a farmer, but seek professional advice, especially when it comes to the area of health of your fish. So when you do that, if you monitor your water and you are doing your feeding properly, and also the health aspect is not neglected, within a period of 150 days, it is expected from stocking, it is expected that you will have a bountiful harvest.
All right. Well, it is expected that you will have a bountiful harvest. These are the words of Gabriel Wase, who happens to be a fisheries consultant and also a fisheries scientist here on your first agricultural TV station, where he's been talking about fish grower, the holistic approach to it in general. Let's go on a quick break. Of course, when we return, we'll be rounding up the show. Stay tuned. Many thanks for staying with us here on Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria Television. Before I went on that break, we've been talking with none other but Gabriel Wase, fisheries scientist and also a consultant in the fisheries. So we've been talking about fish grow out. Well, Mr. Wase, before we went on that break now, let's talk about fish feeding and grow out.
Yeah.
Is there any other way? Because right now fish farmers are complaining about fish feed because of it expensive. In fact, a lot of businesses are folding because of the expensive nature of fish feed. Is there any other way to compromise fish feed in a way that, okay, we know when it comes to other businesses like the poultry, you know, there are some ways you might want to improvise to make some feed by yourself. So is there any other way you can compromise to be able to meet up the target, or you just have to insist on the floating feed, which are imported and quite expensive when it comes to right now?
Not at all.
Okay.
You do not have to rely on conventional feed when it comes to fish.
Okay.
Yeah, so in fish feeding too, one can be able to improvise. For instance, today there are many farms who own their own feed mills, where they produce on-farm feeds. They are not for commercial purposes, but they are meant for their own fish. So if you have the resources, it's a good step. But if you have less of resources, there's still an avenue that you can achieve this. It's just a matter of you sourcing for locally feed ingredients. Most of these ingredients that we use can be locally sourced. The soya beans, you have the binders, which can be any form of binder at all. Then what you necessarily must acquire are just those micronutrients, and then maybe the fish meal, which is quite essential. But the rest of the ingredients can be sourced locally. So when you are able to, like if you are operating a big farm, it's very important for you to reduce cost. By the time you feed your fish at the early stages and they can take up to 4 mm, at that point you can be able to manipulate your way out. But at the earlier stages, like I have always said, you don't need to do anything so that you don't compromise the growth potential of your fish. But once they get to a level they can take 4 mm, at that point you can manipulate by making your own feed on the farm. All you need to do is to either develop a formula, or you meet with a consultant or another experienced farmer who can share their formula with you. You procure the ingredients and bring them together. It doesn't take so much. If you train your fish to take sinking pellets, they do that. A lot of farmers are using sinking pellets today just to reduce cost. And yes, while we may not be able to get the exact nutrient composition as at some of these readily conventional feeds, we can still get to somewhere. Remember, I've always said that for each 1 kg of feed consumed by fish, 1 kg of weight gain is expected. But in instances where you cannot achieve that because you are using locally made feeds, of course, then the cost too is cheaper. If you require, for instance, maybe 1,500 naira to procure 1 kg of conventional feed, you may be using 900 naira to produce your own feed. Which means even if you are using 1.5 kg of feed to get 1 kg of weight gain, you are still running at a profit. So it is advisable that farmers should try to look inwardly. What farm produce are common around within your area, because every nutrient can be replaced by 1 or 2 or more farming produce. So that is a way of reducing cost. And additionally, today there are many persons who own composite farms where you have different sections. You have the poultry, you have the livestock, you have agronomy, and then your fish is also there. So this becomes a situation, a win-win situation for you, because whatever waste that is coming from the poultry section becomes important in your ponds. The water from the wastewater from your pond is also essential in the agronomy, where you use it to water your crops. So you can as well use dead chicken to feed your fish. You can also produce maggot to complement your feeding. Of course, you know maggot is high, it has a high protein. Yes. So if you can be able to produce your own maggot too, you boost your fish growth. But that is just like to supplement, not the major feed. But like twice a week, you can administer the maggot for your fish and they will do well. So these are just ways of trying to manipulate your way out because of the cost of feeds and have the same good results that has been expected.
Wow. You talked about once you feed your fish 1 kg, 1 kg weight is expected.
Yes.
So what is the analytical way to say how much will a 1 kg fish be able to consume to give you 1 kg weight? Analytically, let's say you put 500 fish, so like 1 kg feed, how much will that be now at the end? That the feed you have to feed it.
Yeah, that is what we even use in calculating the feed consumption for a farm. So if a farmer stocks whatever XYZ number of a quantity of fish, and they contact us, because most farmers want to have an estimate of what is expected to feed their fish. So this is the basis from which the calculations are made. For instance, if a farmer stocks like 1,000 fish, for example, and we expect, and maybe the farmer wants to harvest at 1 kg average weight gain. So in that case, we recommend that the farmer should be prepared to use up to 66 and a half, which is roughly 67 bags or 15 kg of fish feed to arrive at that weight. So at the end of the day, you are going to have some who are going to weigh 1.5, 1.7, a few of them 2 kgs, very few of them will weigh below 1 kg, maybe around 800, 700 grams, but on the average, you are targeting 1 kg average weight gain, so you achieve it. So for 1,000, you'll be looking at 67 bags of feed or 15 kg each. So that's the analysis. That's how we analyze to get the quantity of feed required.
It's still your first agricultural TV station in the nation capital. Of course, I've been here together with none other but Gabriel Wase, fishery scientist and consultant, where he's been telling us all we need to know about fish grow out. On that note, I'm afraid we have to come to the end of the program. I'm sure you must have learned one or two about how to do fish grow out. Of course, aqua farming will come your way same time, same station next week. Many thanks for staying through. Bye for now.